Thanks, Strom. I don't know about you guys, but I want to go take all of those courses. All right, so I'm here today to tell a little story about how, about 5 years ago, I basically hit rock bottom as a writing instructor. For a quarter of a century now, a little scary to think about, I've been helping students improve their papers, and my method has been pretty much the same for a long time. My philosophy is the best way to help students make good use of the comments that I'm giving them on their papers is to sit down with a one-on-one conference. Right? We talk through the comments and questions, the student revises the paper, the writing is much better, so I feel like mission accomplished. The grade goes up, so they feel good, everybody wins, right? But then about 5 years ago, I started to notice something. Every so often, I'll have a student again in a second course. And the papers they wrote in the second course showed almost all of the same problems that we'd been attacking and trying to address when we revised the paper in course number 1. So I couldn't figure out what was going on. Why wasn't there any lasting improvement in their writing, right? Why couldn't they transfer what they'd learned? Had they learned anything about the revision process? Why couldn't they transfer it from one course to another course with the same professor, right? So at this point, I felt very much like Wesley in The Princess Bride, right? I was in the pit of despair, right? And I found myself thinking about, the hundreds and hundreds of hours I'd spent carefully crafting comments and the thousands, literally thousands of hours I'd spent in one-on-one conferences. Nothing was sticking. So as I lay there wallowing, I began to reflect. And it occurred to me that I'd kind of been asking, how can I help students improve this piece of writing? But what I wanted to ask now was, how can I help them grow as writers?
So student growth and the transfer of knowledge from one context to another is something that I think about constantly in my own teaching and in my role as director of writing programs. Through my collaboration with Kara and through our work with the FDI, I've learned that students, too, experience their own unique pit of despair. The student's pit of despair can be summed up by one question. It's a question that we hear students asking all around campus as they negotiate writing assignments in different courses and in different contexts. Students ask, and they really want to know, what does my professor want? What does my professor want? We've all heard different versions of this same question, and in many ways it's the beginning of a useful realization for students. It's early recognition that writing itself often varies by discipline. It varies by context. There are common elements of effective writing that often carry over from course to course and from context to context, but students often don't see those common elements. Students often don't see those core moves of thinking and writing that carry over. So ultimately, students really want to know, what does my professor want? Students want to know what counts as effective thinking and writing in this particular assignment for this particular professor in this particular course. So what we have in the end is a kind of opportunity. We have an opportunity to name what we value in student writing so that students can take ownership, so that students can see and practice the core moves of thinking and writing that we require of them across the curriculum in different courses and contexts. We have the opportunity, in other words, to help students think through their writing.
So, if I was going to climb out of that pit of despair, I needed a new plan. So I signed up for the FDI, had a great 3-day workshop, lots of fascinating ideas and support for this crazy notion that I'd had about experimenting with writing portfolios. I realized a couple of things. If I wanted the students to change their writing process, I was going to have to ask them to pay attention to it more than once during the term. I was going to have to build that in all the way along. And if I wanted them to have some ownership of their learning and some skin in the game, I was going to have to take much more of a back seat in the revision process, right? In other words, I needed to make myself obsolete, right? So these days, I'm using very elementary writing portfolios that I just set up using Google Docs folders, right? And I still meet with the students one-on-one, but this time it happens at the beginning of this term, and it's a planning meeting. They bring in a writing sample, and we talk about the things that they struggle with when they write literature papers. And I say, okay, we've got 10 weeks. Let's pick 2 skills, just 2 things that you have trouble with, and let's work on improving them over the term. And I tell them, just like those people who go on The Biggest Loser, right? We're looking for a really dramatic improvement over these 10 weeks. And the way we're going to get there is by focusing not just on what you're writing, but on how you're writing it. So I tell them, your job is to show me your writing process. For every assignment, they show me 3 stages. On the left, brainstorming. I don't care what form it takes, just so long as it's there. Second, they write what I call the before draft, which we then workshop in class. They get feedback from their peers. And of course, anybody who has taught writing knows that the process of giving feedback to somebody else is practice for asking the questions that will make you a better writer. I see a lot of people nodding here. So after that, they turn in the after draft, and they have to make all their revision decisions clearly visible to me. They boldface anything that they've changed, and they use the marginal comments function to explain why they made the change. And this means that when I'm grading their work, I have not just what they wrote, but I get to see their whole process, and I can give them feedback about that process. So instead of the old way, where I gave them individual comments on individual papers, now I use a kind of numerical feedback. This is from an English professor, right? I'm making charts and graphs, right? This is a mock-up of what they see in their portfolio folder. 3 charts where I help them visualize how quickly they're making progress, both with the individual skills that they've picked, their progress at tweaking their writing process and improving it so that they get the results they want, and the quality of the feedback they're giving to other people. So, $64,000 question, has it worked? Well, I'm feeling a lot more optimistic these days. And I've got a few insights from the self-evaluations that I asked them to do at the end of the term. I say, look back at your early writing. What do you notice now at the end of these 10 weeks? I say, what do you want to work on in your writing going forward? Make a plan. And I ask them for input about the portfolio itself. And as you can see from this small but representative sample, they're all able to look critically at their past writing and this time name what they would fix. Many of them feel that they've got lots of tools that they can use going forward to improve as writers. And the comments that really make my heart go pitter-pat are the ones like this one at the bottom. I hope you can see it, where students are describing to me how they found themselves using the processes and the questions that we've been asking in the course in a context that has nothing to do with introduction to fiction. So, the Holy Grail, transference, right? So I no longer feel like I'm stuck in the pit of despair.
So what's so fabulous is that CARS students make connections, and they apply what they learn from one assignment to the next, from one context to the next. CARS students learn to express and develop their ideas through writing, on one hand, and they learn to think through their own writing process and make major changes in the way they go about writing, on the other. Now, we've also learned a lot through this process. Probably first and foremost, we've learned not to despair. We've learned to collaborate, and we've learned to work with each other and help each other think through how best to go about teaching college writing. Car and I have developed several workshops for faculty with the help of the Mosh Grant, and we're going to continue this work. We're going to continue asking the big questions. Imagine, for example, imagine a broader portfolio initiative built up across courses, across disciplines, across the college. How would that help students internalize the core thought moves, the core writing moves that we require of them in all of our courses? What if all students had the time and the space to reflect on their growth as thinkers and writers from the moment they first stepped foot on campus all the way up through graduation and everywhere in between? We think this could really help transform the culture of student writing on campus. The Faculty Development Institute has helped us sort of think through some of these challenges, and we're going to continue this work. So we ask, don't despair. let's continue this. Thank you.
Thank you.